Quiet on the set, please.
Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
And action!
Welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. If you love old movies, Hollywood history, or the golden age of filmmaking, you've come to the right place. This is the podcast that talks about amazing stories of Tinseltown from another era. Hear fascinating conversations with writer-producer Steve Cubine, who quite literally lives just beneath the Hollywood sign, and actress-writer Nan McNamara. Now your hosts, Steve and Nan.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. Hi Nan.
Hi Steve.
You know, when I was a kid, I loved the magic of The Sound of Music.
Oh, who doesn't love The Sound of Music?
Such a great movie, 1965 as we all know. And while I love me some Julie Andrews, and I did, I was mesmerized by actress Eleanor Parker, who played the Baroness, who was the villain who really wasn't that bad in the movie.
Yes.
From that frosty demeanor and that perfectly coiffed blonde hair and her resolve to ship those perky kids off to boarding school, I found her fascinating. What can I say? I liked the bad girls of film.
Yes.
Well, not long after seeing this movie, I watched a movie called Caged, 1950, which is this very tense, dramatic, compelling women's prison picture about this young, innocent woman who has to navigate her way through the prison system. And in this one, the actress, also Eleanor Parker, had short, cropped-off blonde hair, and it looked completely different from the Baroness. It just blew my mind that this was the same woman. How could it be? She had such versatility, she had such range, which made her a very popular and revered actress in the 40s and 50s. So it surprises me that Eleanor Parker is not better remembered or revered today.
I agree.
During the height of her career, she was called a chameleon because she never looked the same in any two movies, and she even took on different parts, comedies, romances, westerns. Right. You know, she really had range. And as wonderful as that is, and I think it really helped her career back then, I think it hurts her legacy in a really weird way. Because she changed her appearance and her acting style and even the types of roles she played so frequently in her movies, she never really developed a movie star persona that made her recognizable and unique like Barbara Stanwyck and Joan Crawford and Bette Davis did. So today we're going to honor Eleanor Parker and we're going to remind people of her talent and her charm. So this forgotten talent is going to be our star of the month.
Eleanor Jean Parker was born on June 26, 1922 in Cedarville, Ohio. Her father, Lester Day Parker, was a high school mathematics teacher, and her mother was Lola. Parker had an older brother and sister, John and Mildred. Now, she was drawn to the idea of being an actress at a very young age. Eleanor was a big fan of Greta Garbo, Norma Shearer, Anne Harding, and her favorite, Janet Gaynor. And she actually created scrapbooks for all of them.
Oh, how cute.
I know. In elementary school, her parents permitted her to enroll in what was called the Tucker School of Expression, which focused on the art of self-knowledge, self-control, and self-expression. At the age of 10, she joined a group, which I love this name, called the Curtain Pullers, which was a children's acting group at the very famous Cleveland Playhouse.
Now, her parents were generally pretty supportive of her ambitions for the arts, but when she asked them for dance lessons, they said no. Not one to be stopped. Eleanor saved her lunch money, and when she had enough for dance classes, she took the streetcar by herself to attend class. When her parents found out, they agreed that if she was willing to work that hard, and she could take the classes.
Well, as a child, she also played dress up in the attic and put on basement productions, which she wrote, charging 2 cents for admission. Did I ever tell you I used to do that?
Oh, I love that.
Backyard.
All the greats did.
In later years, she was quoted as saying, "I always did character parts. I've played men, I've played witches. I was never the heroine until I hit Hollywood. Even in The Three Bears, when I was 5, I was the mother bear, not Goldilocks. In Pinocchio, I was the scrub woman. So it kind of follows with what you were saying at the top
the
of the show.
chameleon, exactly.
Yeah.
She was also a bit of a tomboy growing up. She played baseball, she played football, climbed trees, she even cracked a tooth on a monkey bars. She thinks her trademark husky voice came from all the yelling she did while playing as a child. And she once said, "I was a demon on wheels as a child, a real menace, refusing to share her toys with other children, taunting her brother and sister, and cooking up trouble for her friends. I was a little girl who was always daring them to do something awful, but always very careful to stay out of trouble myself."
Well, good for her. In high school, she was very popular. She dated and acted in school plays, eventually being voted president of the dramatic club. At 15, she convinced her parents to allow her to spend her summer vacation studying acting at the Rice Summer Theater on Martha's Vineyard, where she spent 2 summers. She was eventually cast in a small part in the comedy What a Life, where she was spotted by a talent scout from 20th Century Fox and was offered a screen test. But unlike many of our other subjects that are stars of the month, Parker wanted to be a movie star, but she knew she wasn't ready. And so she refused the test and returned to finish high school.
No, smart girl.
Yep.
No, nobody does that. After high school, she was deciding between studying in New York at the American Academy or going to California to study at the Pasadena Playhouse. Knowing her goal was to be in movies, she of course applied for the Pasadena Playhouse and was accepted. It's as if she knew from the time she was very little that being an actress was her destiny. And she's once quoted saying, "I wasn't the least worried about coming to California. I knew I'd get in pictures. I wasn't even afraid of all the tough luck stories I'd heard about girls who'd gone to Hollywood but hadn't conquered it. I knew that if I trained myself properly, I'd be ready for the break when it came."
That's a lot of confidence.
That is a lot of confidence.
So she drove to Southern California with the aunt and uncle of one of her boyfriends and started her classes at the Pasadena Playhouse. Now, at the time, new students were not allowed on stage, but as luck would have it, she's in the audience attending a performance at the Playhouse in February of her first semester, and she's spotted in the audience by Irving Kuman, the assistant casting director at Warner Brothers. Can you believe that luck?
Wow.
She was asked once again about doing a screen test. She said she'd prefer to finish her first year at the Playhouse, so he told her to call him when she was ready, and she phoned in June of that year.
Who needs Schwab's drugstore when you got the Pasadena Playhouse audience?
Sit in the audience and get discovered.
Exactly. For her screen test, she prepared 2 scenes from the play Claudia and the Animal Kingdom with studio drama coach Sophie Rosenstein, and she passed. She was then signed to a Warner Brothers contract at a whopping $75 a week on her birthday, June 26, 1941.
So even though she had a seemingly smooth rise to getting her first movie contract, her time at Warner Brothers was pretty frustrating. There were a lot of actresses under contract vying for parts. We talked about that last week with our Warner Brothers history. Bette Davis, Olivia de Havilland, Anne Sheridan, Ida Lupino, Jane Wyman, Mary Astor, Joan Leslie, and then eventually in the 40s, Joan Crawford, and throughout, Barbara Stanwyck, just to name a few.
Well, her debut was a small part opposite a very young Gig Young, who was then working under his stage name of Byron Barr, in the Raoul Walsh directed film They Died with Their Boots On, 1942, which of course starred Errol Flynn and Olivia de Havilland in their final screen pairing together. But her scenes were ultimately cut due to the picture running too long.
Well, during her first year and a half at Warner's, she spent only 4 weeks on camera.
Wow.
Mostly, she assisted other people in doing their tests. As one fan magazine writer put it, she had her back to the camera more often than her face. She also posed for publicity photos. We've talked about that in previous episodes. Yep.
Now, in 1942, she appeared in a number of films, but nothing particularly memorable. She was in a short film for the war effort called Soldiers in White. She played a nurse, and she provided the offstage voice in The Big Shot, which starred Humphrey Bogart. She was in another war film, Men of the Sky, and had a bit part in the short Vaudeville Days. Her featured debut, however, was in Bus's Roar, playing a counter girl, and she had a part in another short, We're With the Army Now, which came out in 1943, about the Women's Army Corps.
She described this period as, quote, "I was such a nice, quiet little thing that no one would give me a chance to play anything else on the screen. Those early jobs were all good preparation for me. They taught me what not to do. I wanted to be a real actress rather than a personality star."
An early break came when she was cast as the ingenue lead in Mission to Moscow, 1943, directed by Michael Curtiz. While filming, she met Lieutenant Fred L. Losey, a dentist with the Navy Medical Corps who was visiting the set. They were smitten with each other, and they married after a very short courtship in Tijuana in the spring of 1943. But Losey was serving in the South Pacific, and they didn't really see each other for more than a year.
She was cast in another voice-only role in Destination Tokyo 1944 starring Cary Grant. Now, while the part was pretty thankless, the picture was directed by Delmer Daves. He took an interest in Parker. She next starred for the first time in an A film, Between Two Worlds, 1944, with John Garfield and Paul Henreid. And then Delmer Daves cast her in 3 films. The Very Thought of You, 1944, opposite Dennis Morgan. Hollywood Canteen, also 1944, starring
everybody.
And Pride of the Marines, 1945, once again playing the love interest opposite John Garfield, who was playing a blinded war hero. Now, Eleanor considered this her big break. Just a quick side note about director Delmer Daves. He would reportedly sit under the camera with a box of tissues and weep on every take.
Oh,
isn't that sweet?
I love that.
Yeah.
Parker's family helped support her during this time. They loaned her money to buy a car. And of her family, she once said, "I'm in this spot because I gave up everything else to get here. But at that, I could never have made it without Daddy. Somebody has to believe in you enough to pay the bills. You must remember that Daddy is a school teacher, not a millionaire, and my tuition for 1 year at Pasadena was $600. My room and board without lunch was $40 a month, but it was worth it."
Well, her career is on the upswing, but her marriage is not. Parker divorced her first husband on December 5th, 1944, testifying that he had embarrassed her by telling a house guest he had never seen any of her films and wasn't interested in her career.
Husband of the Year material there.
Yeah, right. She admitted to a reporter that she had realized the marriage was a mistake before Fred had gone overseas, but she didn't think it right to divorce a serviceman leaving for the war.
Parker received a lot of publicity in 1944, including an article by gossip columnist Luella Parsons entitled "Best Actress Since Greta Garbo." That is quite
coming from Luella?
a statement. Ooh. Exactly. Well, apparently this was a direct quote from Edmund Goulding, the director of the remake of Human Bondage from 1946, where Parker played Mildred, the manipulative and crass waitress, which was a role made famous, we all know, by Bette Davis in the 1934 version. However, Goulding didn't initially want Parker in the role. He thought she was not tough enough to play Mildred, so he had her test twice. Parker was so intent on getting the role that she studied the Cockney accent with British character actress Doris Lloyd, who ended up with a small role in the film. Her accent was so believable that the extras on set were convinced she was a Brit.
Well, I thought this was such a lovely story. On Parker's first day of filming, she received a large bowl of gardenias with a note that read, "I hope that Mildred will do as much for your career as she did for mine. In your hands, I know she will." Signed, Bette Davis.
Aw, very classy.
Very classy.
And unfortunately, it wasn't the case because the movie was not very well received.
Not very well received, yeah.
Too bad.
And after the film, she did 2 films opposite Warner Brothers superstar Errol Flynn, Never Say Goodbye, 1946, and Escape Me Never, 1947. She tells a story about working with Errol Flynn. They were waiting for a scene to be set up. She was thirsty. He was holding a glass of what looked like milk. She asked for a sip, and she nearly choked. It was mostly gin.
Oh, that Errol.
Gin and milk. Yeah, that sounds like a good one.
That is funny. I've heard of gin and juice, but never gin and milk. Parker married for a second time on January the 5th, 1946 to Bert Friedlob, a wholesale liquor dealer whom she met on a double date. Both were dating other people, and when they each broke up with their respective partners, Friedlob called Parker and invited her out for New Year's Eve. On this date, he pulled her aside and gave her a 5-carat diamond. They eloped to Las Vegas. Friedlob then later became an independent producer through 20th Century Fox in the 1950s. They tried to keep the marriage a secret, but 2 weeks later at 2 in the morning, Luella Parsons calls up Parker saying that she knew that they had gotten married. Well, Parker said that she and Bert went over to Luella's house that night. They drank some champagne, they toasted their marriage, and Parsons got to break the news.
Eleanor Parker's next role was that of the young actress in Voice of the Turtle, 1947, opposite Ronald Reagan, a part that was coveted quoted by all the leading actresses of the time. It was based on the popular Broadway play by John Van Druten, which had starred Margaret Sullivan.
Now, next she played identical cousins in the melodrama The Woman in White, 1948, which co-starred Alexis Smith and Sidney Greenstreet. This was based on the Wilkie Collins novel. She followed this up with a cameo appearance as herself in the star-filled comedy It's a Great Feeling, 1949, which starred Doris Day. In 1950, she starred opposite Humphrey Bogart in the airplane drama Chain Lightning.
During this time, she and her husband Bert settled into domestic life, and she had her first child, Susan Eleanor, on March 7th, 1948. Over the years, Parker was quoted as saying that while she loved acting, her family came first, and that if her work ever interfered with her private life, she would quit performing and never look back. Now, before we get into her time in the 1950s and the movie you mentioned at the top, Caged, let's tell our listeners this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
Now, the pop quiz question is, what was Errol Flynn's nickname for Eleanor Parker when they worked together?
Oh, this is such a good one.
It's fun, yeah.
All right, we'll be right back with that and more about the wonderful Eleanor Parker after this.
Steve and Ann will be right back, but first another stop on the Hollywood tour. Speaking of the Sound of Music, did you know you can still go to Salzburg, Austria and take a Sound of Music tour? It's a popular choice for fans of that musical. The tour visits many filming locations, including one of the set pieces from one of the most iconic scenes in that film. It's the gazebo, used for both the 16 going on 17 and Something Good scenes used in the film. But be forewarned, you can no longer go inside the gazebo. Why? Well, it seems too many fans who are considerably older than 16 going on 17 were injuring themselves. How? From, you guessed it, trying to dance along the seats. By the way, that gazebo in Austria was only used for the exterior shots. The actual dance by Charmian Carr and Daniel Truitt was filmed on a replica of the gazebo's interior on a soundstage. That was the 20th Century Fox lot here in Los Angeles. And now, back to Steve and Ann from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Welcome back, everybody. Before we get further into Eleanor Parker and her career in the 50s onward, we're going to give a shout out to our Listener of the Week. And this week, we are honoring Candace Lewis from Arkansas. Candace has been a loyal listener for a while and a great supporter. And she wrote us a beautiful email, really lovely email. Thank you, Candace. She wants to see us do episodes about columnist Dorothy Kilgallen, or maybe Tab Hunter, or even blonde bombshell Jean Carmen. So great suggestions, Candace. So keep an eye out.
Thank you, Candace.
Or an ear out.
Well, we talked about Caged, 1950. This was directed by John Cromwell with a stellar supporting cast that included the great Agnes Moorehead, Hope Emerson, and Jan Sterling.
Who we love here at the podcast.
Eleanor plays Marie Allen, a vulnerable teenage convict whose life is forever changed in a women's prison. Parker was voted the Best Actress at the Venice Film Festival and received her very first Best Actress Academy Award nomination.
It's so well deserved. She's so good in this movie. I just love her in this. Around this time, she had her second child, Sharon Ann, on April 18th, 1950, and she was voted Mother of the Year by the Society of American Florists.
Who knew there was such an award? I didn't know that.
What a nice award.
Yeah.
And ironically, she played a woman who gives up her illegitimate baby for adoption in 3 Secrets, which was directed by Robert Wise and co-starred 2 actresses we also love at the podcast, Ruth Roman and Patricia Neal. This was her last film for Warner Brothers. Her contract was up, and although they wanted her to re-sign, Parker wanted to see what other studios had to offer.
And her first film after leaving Warner Brothers was Valentino, 1951, a fictionalized biography of the silent screen star who was portrayed by Anthony Dexter. She followed this film with a screwball comedy. Of course, she's
all over the place.
So wonderful. With Fred McMurray, called A Millionaire for Christie, 1951, and it was produced by her husband, Fred Friedlob.
Now, next up, she went to Paramount for this prestigious drama, Detective Story, 1951, which was directed by the great William Wyler, and she earned her second Academy Award nomination as Best Actress for the role of Mary McLeod, opposite Kirk Douglas. Now, Detective Story was the film debut also of Lee Grant, who was Oscar nominated as Best Supporting Actress.
She was then signed to a contract with MGM. At this point, MGM is under the leadership of Dory Sherry, and he allowed her to make one film a year at another studio. Her time at MGM started with Scaramouche, 1952, opposite Stuart Granger, and directed by George Sidney. Sidney tells this great story about Parker and her hair. So in the film Scaramouche, he wanted her to play the role of the fiery actress as a redhead, right? Well, Parker was blonde, and she refused to dye her hair. She wanted to stay a blonde. So the studio spent all this money and trouble creating red wigs for Parker. And, you know, in film, wigs are not like they are in the store. They have to look real. So they're
real.
Very expensive. After the film was done shooting, director Sidney ran into Parker at a restaurant. She had red hair. So he asked her what happened, and she replied, "Oh, I thought I looked so good in the red wigs that I decided to become a redhead."
Sure, he could have killed her.
Yeah.
In 1953, she played Robert Taylor's wife in the drama Above and Beyond, which was a story of a pilot who led the atomic bombings of Hiroshima. She also started performing on the radio in several dramas of her film on the Lux Radio Theater and Screen Directors Playhouse.
She had her third child, Richard Parker, on October 8th, 1952. However, the marriage was not going well. She divorced Bert Friedlob on November 10th, 1953, charging grievous mental suffering. She testified that he had made fun of her while she was expecting their third child, belittling her in front of friends. There were also rumors of physical abuse and that he had a relationship with a New York model.
Yikes.
Friedlob died 3 years later after a 5-month bout with cancer on October 7th, 1956.
Other pictures in the 1950s for Eleanor Parker included Escape from Fort Bravo, 1953, which was a Western that co-starred William Holden for MGM. And over at Paramount, she appeared in The Naked Jungle, 1954, which starred Charlton Heston. She was re-teamed with Robert Taylor in 2 more pictures, Valley of the Kings, 1954, which was shot in Egypt, and Many Rivers to Cross, 1955, which was an adventure comedy. There were rumors around this time that Taylor and Parker were romantically involved, since 2 days after her divorce, she was shooting in Egypt with Robert Taylor.
Right.
But Parker denied the affair, although she's quoted as saying, "Bob's my favorite. Such a gentleman. I felt really good working with him. We don't date at all." She who protests too much, maybe?
I don't know. You know, romance, though, was around the corner with someone else. Parker met portrait painter Paul Clemens through William Holden while working on Escape from Fort Bravo. Clemens had painted a portrait of Holden and his family. Holden mentioned him to Eleanor Parker. They later all had lunch together, and Clemens eventually was commissioned to paint a portrait of Eleanor Parker. By the time that portrait was complete, they had had several quiet dates, and they were married on November 25th, 1954.
Oh, how romantic.
Yeah.
Parker cites her favorite film of all of hers as Interrupted Melody, 1955, which was a story of polio-stricken opera star Marjorie Lawrence. This earned her her 3rd Best Actress Academy Award nomination, but the producer, Jack Cummings, didn't initially want Parker. He didn't think she had the right temperament to play a prima donna. Parker normally didn't pursue roles, but this one was different. She reportedly stormed into Cummings' office, accused him of disliking her, and flamboyantly proceeded to show and tell him how she would play the opera singer. Cummings realized she was purposely displaying exactly the temperament needed to play Marjorie Lawrence.
Screenwriter William Ludwig is quoted as talking about this with Interrupted Melody. "I remember watching them shoot the very dramatic scene in which Eleanor, as the now crippled Lawrence, crawls across a room to knock over a record player playing one of her old recordings. Eleanor gave it everything she had, which was plenty. Her knees were bleeding. When the director yelled, 'Cut!' Looking at the rushes afterward, some technician noticed that an overhead microphone was dimly visible in the scene.
No.
So they were going to have to shoot it again. But Ludwig said, look, there's no way Eleanor can possibly top what she's done in this scene. And if people are looking toward the ceiling while she's crawling along on the floor, then we don't have a scene to begin with." So the mic was left in, and to the director's knowledge, not one person or critic ever noticed it.
Okay, now of course I want to go and find that scene and check it out. She really threw herself into every role so completely that she was actually hospitalized briefly for exhaustion. She would later recount, "I don't have an opera voice and I don't speak all those foreign languages. What a challenge. I secluded myself in a mountain cabin at Lake Arrowhead for 10 days and listened to recordings day and night, learning 22 arias. For good measure, I had 6 lessons from MGM's voice coach to help with my lip synchronization. I drove to work in the morning with the score propped up on the steering wheel of my car, and I woke up at night to find I'd been repeating the song in my sleep."
I recently saw this film, maybe 3 months ago. She is so fantastic in her singing the songs. You know she's not singing, but it's so believable.
Her lip syncing is
yes,
dead on.
it's phenomenal. In the second half of the 50s, Parker did 2 films for United Artists: The Man with the Golden Arm, 1955, with Frank Sinatra, and The King and 4 Queens, 1956, with Clark Gable. She then returned to MGM for Lizzie in 1957, playing a young woman with multiple personalities.
And can I just say, Lizzie is such a great movie.
Yeah.
That if you haven't seen that one, it's funny because it came out and then a few months later, The Three Faces of Eve came out and kind of stole the thunder.
Yep.
But check out Lizzie if you really want to see a great movie about multiple personalities.
Yeah. Well, she also played an adulteress in the troubled film The Seventh Sin, 1957.
Now, in 1958, Parker and her husband, Paul Clemens, had a child of their own, Paul Day Clemens, on January the 7th. Clemens legally adopted Parker's previous 3 children from Friedlobe. She re-teamed with Frank Sinatra in the comedy A Hole in the Head from 1959, directed by Frank Capra, and then she played Robert Mitchum's unforgiving wife in the MGM movie Home from the Hill, 1960.
Parker made her television debut in 1960, playing an Irish nun in a 90-minute CBS dramatization of Ernest Hemingway's short story, The Gambler, the Nun, and the Radio. I have not seen that. I really want to see it.
The Irish Nuns.
I know. I'm all about the Irish nuns. Next, she did 2 films for 20th Century Fox, Return to Peyton Place, 1961. She was playing the Lana Turner role, and Madison Avenue, 1962, opposite Dana Andrews.
Even though her roles were scarcer for women of a certain age, perhaps Parker's most well-known role came in 65, The Sound of Music, which we've mentioned at the top of the show.
Yeah.
Robert Weiss had directed Parker in 3 Secrets. As he recounted the story, this is a quote, "We were casting the Baroness in The Sound of Music and looking for an aristocratic beauty with some name value who could also act and look well with Julie Andrews. I thought of Eleanor Parker, with whom I'd loved working. She fit the bill perfectly. She was wonderful in the part, a sort of light-heavy, who was also ultimately quite touching. I have great admiration for Eleanor Parker as an artist of the first rank."
You know, he's so spot on about ultimately quite touching, because she is the bad guy.
But she sacrifices for Julie.
Yeah, well, and for him, for Georg.
And you know, I just read an interview with Christopher Plummer, who played Georg, and he had a big crush on Eleanor Parker during the filming.
Oh, that's lovely.
And who wouldn't?
Right. Well, ultimately, her personal life would experience another blow. On March 9th, 1965, she divorced Paul Clemens, charging extreme cruelty and mental suffering. But she wasn't done with marriage. So that was number 3.
She wasn't one to give up.
No, she wasn't. She had hope. While promoting the film The Oscar, 1966, she met her 4th husband, Raymond N. Hirsch. They married in Las Vegas on April 17th, 1966. They briefly relocated to Chicago, but ultimately returned to Los Angeles, where Hirsch, who came from a family of theater owners, was managing the Shubert Theater.
Well, Parker, who was raised Protestant, she actually converted to her husband's religion of Judaism, and they were remarried under the traditional chuppah 2 years later after the civil ceremony. Parker and Hirsch remained married until Hirsch's death in 2001, making their marriage her longest, 35 years.
Yep. In the late 60s, she made a few cameo appearances in films, including An American Dream, 1966, and Warning Shot in 1967. She also appeared in The Tiger and the Pussycat, 1967, the thriller Eye of the Cat, 1969, and Sunburn, 1979, with Charles Grodin and Farrah Fawcett Majors. But the majority of her work in this time period was on television, and man, did she have some great roles.
Oh, she did. I mean, she was on everything for a while. She was on The Love Boat and Fantasy Island and Hotel, Hawaii Five-0, Murder, She Wrote, Vegas, Bracken's World, where she was actually a series regular on Bracken's World, where she played the mogul's secretary. She quit the show after 16 episodes when her character was left, as she says, answering telephones and holding the children.
She also appeared in some of those great television movies of the 70s. And these are two that I just love. Maybe I'll Come Home in the Spring, 1971, with Sally Field.
Such an interesting movie.
Oh, it's such an interesting movie. Home for the Holidays, which is, I watched that not too long ago. You can find it on YouTube. 1972, again with Sally Field, where Parker plays her homicidal sister. Oh my gosh. And then The Great American Beauty Contest in 1973, which also featured Farrah Fawcett Majors again, Susan Anton, and Tracy Reed in early roles.
Oh, I love that one. That was awesome. She also starred on stage, most notably as Margot Channing in the 1972 National Touring Company of Applause, based on the movie All About Eve, which of course Lauren Bacall had originated on Broadway. And she also appeared as Maxine in a 1974 production of Tennessee Williams' The Night of the Iguana at the Amundsen Theater here in Los Angeles.
Oh, I would have loved to have seen that.
Me too.
Well, her last credited appearance was in the TV movie Dead on the Money, 1991, a thriller with Corbin Burnson. Eleanor Parker died on December 9th, 2013, at the age of 91 from complications of pneumonia.
You know, she really was a true chameleon, as they said. And although she never became an icon like so many other stars of her time, she should be remembered for her range and her elegance and the breadth and depth of her characters.
Yeah, I think so too. I want to give a shout out to Doug McClelland, who wrote a wonderful book. It's really a biography of her and a filmography called Eleanor Parker, Woman of a Thousand Faces.
Great book.
Really great book. I got to ask you, top Eleanor Parker film. We know Sound of Music, so let's exclude that because she's fantastic in that. But if you wanted to recommend one for our listeners that they might not have seen.
You know, the one I'm going to recommend, and it's not very well known, but I love it. It's very mystical and it has these supernatural elements because it's basically about a group of people in purgatory on an ocean liner, and it's called Between Two Worlds, 1944, with John Garfield and Paul Henreid. Great movie, really worth a watch.
Wow. Well, I have loved, and I've wanted to do Eleanor Parker as the Star of the Month for a long time now, so I'm so glad that we finally got to share her amazing life and career. And if any of her children are out there, we just love your mom.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, let's give the answer to this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
Well, the question was, what was Errol Flynn's nickname for Eleanor Parker? And this is fun. Nan, I'm going to let you answer.
All right. He called her Grandma.
And why was that?
Because he thought she was very, very prim and proper. And I bet you could get her loosened up. I don't quite agree with Errol Flynn's version of what prim and proper
maybe
is.
Maybe another milk cup full of gin will do the trick.
Exactly.
I love that, Grandma.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. We would appreciate it if you would give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to this podcast. And if you're watching us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. We can also be followed on social media. Our handle is @FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign. You can check us out on Instagram and on Facebook.
And we love to hear from you. Let us know what your favorite Eleanor Parker movie is. You can email us at info@FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com.
That's this week's view.
From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
You've been listening to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign with Steve Cubine and Ann McNamara, the podcast that celebrates amazing stories of Tinseltown from its golden era. Join us next week for another episode and learn something else about Hollywood you probably never knew. Take a moment and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review, and tell your friends about us too. It'll help grow the podcast. Visit Steve's website at FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com. The executive producers are Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara. Executive producer and post-production supervisor Lindsay Schnebley. Associate producer and researcher John Price Ritchie. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like The Box of Oddities and The Shallow End with Schnebley and Toth. Copyright 2025. All rights reserved. That's a wrap.
Did I ever tell you I used to do that?
Oh, I love that.
In the backyard?
All the greats did.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Oh, that's funny. Oh, God. Okay.
We found an Easter egg.
All right, here we go.